So you're going to want to go ahead and you're going to want to clone this repo, which I just sent the command into the chat. Just to give a quick overview of kind of what we've got here, there are some different moving parts. We're using something called Docker Compose, which will orchestrate these different containers for us. Well, by the time we're done, we're going to have a Postgres database. You'll have a Hasura engine running, which is the company that I work for. Pretty neat tool. We can talk a little bit more about that down the line. You'll also have a quadrant vector database, and then you'll have your bot and then a backend for your bot. The main things we'll be focusing on are the bot and the backend for the bot. Those are both written in Python. Um, so once you have cloned this repo, you can go ahead and open the setup.md file, and it's going to talk a little bit about our prerequisites here. You will need to have Docker installed. You will need an open API key, which I believe Michael said he had one that he was going to be able to provide for people to use for the workshop. I know that'll be one thing we'll need down the line. And then the last thing we are going to need is a Discord server. So there's two different ways we could do this, and I'll ask you guys what you think is going to be easiest. We could have each person make their own server. That one would be a little bit more involved, but it would give you full control over this. Or we could try and throw everybody into one server and like create multiple channels in it. So does anyone have a preference either way? If we set it up where you have your own server with the spot running, you'll have the full administrative permissions. So you'll be able to kind of go and play with a little more, but that is going to be a little bit more of an involved step. Shouldn't take too long, but any preferences? I need people to be interactive here. Help me out, guys.
We can do our own.
Okay, cool. Well,
That
then
way we
let's
can
go
mess with it
ahead.
later.
Let's go ahead and do that. So I'm gonna switch my screen to Discord. So what you're going to want to do here, you can now see my Discord. You're gonna want to go to the little plus, okay, to add a server or create my own, but it's gonna be for a club or community. Um, when I set this up, I set it up inside of our company's Discord channel. So I didn't have to worry about that step, but I guess that's a Discord thing where uh, forum channels can only be in those types of servers. So you're going to want to go ahead and now you should be able to create a new forum channel. Let me see. Okay, my bad. We have to enable community in our server. So go to server settings, enable community, get started. So my bad, guys, found it. That's what it was. So you want to say get started for this. Are you building a community? And then you do have to have your email linked. And then it will ask you to give permission to scan media for restricted content. And then from there, for the rules or guidelines, we can just say create one for me. And for the community updates channel, we'll just let it create one for us there as well. And then we just want to agree and click the finish setup. And now it should be a community enabled server, which now if we go over here to the little create channel, we'll have the forum option. So now we can go ahead and create a forum channel. And as you can see, this is a little bit different than your general channel. This is going to have you creating posts. So it might look something like my help post or whatever, and then it would be the question from the user here, right? And what's going to happen is once we get this set up, whenever you post here, the bot is going to automatically give a response to the question. So the next thing that we're going to do is, let me go to the setup.md. There's a couple different IDs that we're going to want to note down now. And we also are going to need to create a Discord bot. So to do that, I'm going to go ahead and switch the screen that I'm sharing. You're gonna want to have a page that looks something like this. So then the next step, then you're gonna want to create a new application. And actually, one thing that I would say on that setup.md, I would maybe keep that open in a different tab or in the background. Those are the steps that we're going to be now going through. There's also images and pictures there. So if you go to the GitHub repo, let me get a link for that real quick. Um, that will also, you can also, feel free to kind of follow along on your own if I'm going a little slow for you. I'm just trying to make sure we have everybody able to kind of keep up. So we're going to want to go ahead and click the new application button, and you're going to want to name your bot. You can name it whatever you want. I'll name this one Help Bot, let's say. And you're going to want to agree to the terms of service, and then you will click create. From there, you're going to want to go to the bot tab right here. And inside of that bot tab, the first thing we're going to do is turn off public bot, because this is not going to be a bot we're putting in a bunch of servers. This is just a little toy bot that we're going to be using. And then the next thing that we want to do is turn on all of the privileged gateway intents. So you're just going to want to turn on all of these toggles right here. This is just a couple different setup steps with what the bot does. Basically, what these are doing is it's going to allow your bot, when it joins a server, to listen to certain events. So in this case, like presence updates. So like if a user goes online or offline, or being able to see what the username is of someone who sent messages. So the server's members intent, right? These are just different permissions that we want to give to our bot. The next thing that we want to do is we want to go to the OAuth 2 tab. And then in the OAuth 2 tab, we want to scroll down to the URL generator. And for the scopes, we're going to select bot. And then we're going to scroll down to where it says bot permissions. And for this workshop, we're just going to go ahead and say administrator. Typically, what you would do as you go to build out your bot is you would figure out which specific permissions you would need. But for our case, so that you don't end up having any issues if you try to do something or if you look up a Discord server command, we'll just go ahead and give it administrator. And then what you're going to do is you're going to copy this URL here at the bottom that says copy. And then we're going to go to the Discord server. So what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to go, and I will go into I guess we'll just go to the welcome channel, and I'm going to post or paste that URL. And then if you now click it inside of Discord, it's going to say, hey, do you want to add your bot? We're going to say, yes, we want to add the bot. So continue. We're going to authorize it to have administrator permission on our server. And then it's going to ask me to prove that I am a human. So I'll click the little checkbox. And now, as you can see here, it says that, hey, in the general channel, a wild help bot has appeared. So we are progressing. We're getting a little bit closer. The next step is going to be to get some of the specific information that we need in order to start up our bot. So we're getting closer. There's not too many more steps. What we're going to want to do is you're going to want to go back to that Discord developer portal, and you're going to want to go to the bot section again. And now we're going to click this reset token button. So when we reset this token, we're going to say, yep, do it. It might ask you to enter your password for Discord. So I'll give everybody a second there. And it's going to give you a token. And for now, we're going to set that aside, but we're going to need that here in a bit. So save that somewhere, maybe put a little label. For me, I'm just setting it in my notes on my computer, and I'm just going to put a little label for bot token so that I can refer to that in a second. And then the next step is going to be to grab a couple other IDs. So basically what we're going to want to do is we're gonna want to, I'll grab all of the IDs now so that you guys can see how I do that when I do the screen share, and then we'll fill it out in a second and I'll switch to my code editor. So you're gonna want to get the guild ID, and to do that, you're gonna right click on the server, and then at the very bottom, it's gonna say copy server ID. So you're gonna want to save that in the notes or whatever notepad you're using. I'm just gonna put server ID, save that in my notes. You're also going to want to get the ID of a logging channel. So the general channel will work just fine for that. So you, again, will right click, you will click the copy channel ID, save that somewhere as well. I'm gonna just label it channel ID. Sorry, it's a little repetitive. Once we get through this, it will be cool. We'll have something running and it'll be more exciting than just copying and pasting a bunch of stuff. Um, but then the next thing we're gonna need to get the ID of the forum channel that we're gonna link the bot to listen to. So in this case, I'm gonna go to that forum. And again, I'm just gonna copy the channel ID and I'm going to save that. Uh,
Sorry.
yeah, what's up?
What
No,
was
go
the
ahead.
first channel ID you copied?
The first thing I copied was the server ID. So I
I got
right click on the
the.
server,
I thought you
do
did
that.
another channel
Then
before
yeah,
forum.
I did general as
Oh, I'm sorry.
well.
Okay, cool.
So, and that's just gonna be wherever your bot will log messages to.
Okay.
So it could be whatever channel you wanted. But for me, I copied the ID for general. So the next thing that we're going to want to do, you'll go into your server settings, right? And you're going to go ahead and you want to go to roles. You're going to want to create a new role. I am just going to call it mod. Um, and then I'm going to save my changes. Then you should be able to right click the role, copy the role ID. This is the last one, I promise. This is the last copy we need. And so I'm going to save that as just in my notes, mod role ID. And now what I'm about to do is switch over to my code editor, and we're going to now take all of those things that we just did, and we're going to make use of them. So let me go ahead and go back to Visual Studio Code. And so now the next thing that we're going to do, you can see here, I've got my instructions set up. So we're now right here on step 2, where we're getting ready to fill out this seed data. We've already collected all of the things. So basically there's a seed.json file. And what you basically want to do is you want to replace the guild ID with your server ID. And the guild ID appears in two places. The first one is on line 9. So I'm going to replace it now with my new guild ID. The second one is on line 17. So you just want to replace it there. This is basically going to seed a Postgres database here in a minute is what we're going to use it for. The next thing is the logging channel ID. You're going to want to go ahead and replace that. That's on line 10. So that was the second thing that we had, or the first channel that we grabbed. I think mine was the general channel. You also will now place the mod role that we grabbed. You'll fill out mod role ID. That will be on line 11. And then in the forum channel ID, you're going to want to put whatever your forum channel was. So that was the forum that we created. And so that will be on line 18. So you want to cd into the directory in a command line, because we've got this little seed.py script. And once you have filled out the seed.json, you're just going to run, yeah, the server ID goes in guild ID. Once you filled out the seed.json, you will run python3 seed.py or just python seed.py. And that is going to go ahead and create a seed file for you. It's a seed SQL file. Then the last step is going to be to go, we're going to copy. So you're going to want to do, for me on a Mac, it'll be CP, and then I'm going to say .env.example to .env. So we basically just want to set up our env. So I've got this .env.example that has all of these environment variables that are going to be used when I go to start this container. We're going to be filling out these last four, and I believe since Michael probably does not have the organization, we'll actually just be omitting this last one. So what we will be doing is, so you'll put your, this again, you're going to want to grab that server ID, and that's going to go on line 14 of the .env. You're also going to want to, now that thing we copied way in the very beginning, the bot token, that everyone's like, why was that step? Probably should have done that now, but grab that. That will be your Discord client secret. So that was one of the very first things we copied. It should look something like what I just pasted there. Um, Obviously, it won't be the same, but it will be of a similar format. Then we will take the API key that Michael has so kindly provided in the chat. And then for this, we will just omit the organization ID. So that will go ahead and set it to none, which should be fine. And then once you have completed all of these steps, you should be able to go ahead and now run Docker compose up. And that might be another step for some people. Some people might have Docker, might not have Docker Compose. If you don't, we can get you set up with Docker Compose as well. It will take a second to start. Once it starts, assuming everything has been successful, it will take a second to start up, but then once it does, you should get a message into the channel your welcome channel that says your bot has come online. And again, that'll take a couple seconds because in the Docker Compose setup, it is set to start only when the GraphQL engine is healthy. So you should have something once it starts up, you should see all of your containers here. And I hope this is legible for people. Apologize if it's not perfect, but you should have all your containers right here, and they should all be started. You should see in the Discord server, it should say that the bot has logged in. What you should have now, you should have a bot, should be running. And here's how we can use this bot. So to start, we can test it by just saying /hello. It should say hello world back. And then what you should be able to do is you can go into your forum channel that you specified. And if you start a conversation now in the forum channel, help me with, and it's currently linked up to Hasura's v3 documentation. So I'll say, help me with the Hasura CLI, for example. Please tell me how to use the CLI. If you post a chat, you should see the bot will say, oh, it's going to start by posting something that it posts when it is thinking. And then, after a second, it will go ahead and it will generate a response for you. So it will go ahead and tell you the response, like it says, hey there, it looks like you're interested in getting started with the CLI, blah, 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 a little bit of information. Here's the tools, here's the commands, and it will also cite its sources from the documentation. And so we can, now that we've got it running, does anyone not have it running? And now we can kind of just jump into different places and poke at it and play with it and talk about kind of how it works, and if anyone's curious about specific aspects, some interesting things to poke at and what could be potentially kind of fun to mess with, especially if you are into Python, right? All of this is written in Python, so you can actually look at the bot itself. And one fun thing to do is to, if you look at the app.py, this is kind of the main entry point, and you can see these this thing that says tree.command here, and it says hello. and then it links to a specific command handler. So this is how you could write your own command, actually. So if you wanted to make your own command that did something, whatever it might be, right? You would add a command here, right? And you might give it a description and so on and so forth. And you basically could fill out all of this information, right? And you can click through and look at, how these different things are working here. So here, let me also bump that up a little bit just to make sure people can see. Um, so you should be able to go in and add your own commands to the bot, um, and also see how all of these commands are working. This hello one's a very, very simple one, but it shows you how to take the input from the bot and then send a response. And then all of the different commands uh, are available here, so you can kind of poke at it and prod at it. And kind of see how the different things work. There is a task loop as well. So if you've ever been curious about like an event-driven system, there actually is a task loop that's inside of the task loop dir uh, directory, and basically you can see what we're doing. Here is we're basically going to get all a list of all the tasks to run. Then we're going to go ahead and send the messages. Um, Again, I'm not going to sit here and just go through all of it, but that's kind of probably where the meat of what is happening here is occurring, is in this task loop, which the accompanying blog post, which is in the README, goes over everything, including lots of really nice GIFs and information about kind of every single piece, part, and component. So definitely would recommend, as you play with this some and mess with it and maybe tweak it to run your own bot or to add your own documentation. You have all of these Docker containers running. Um, so are there any questions? Is anyone curious of how something works or want to know a little bit more?
I think since we're looking at the integration between Discord and ChatGPT or these LLMs, uh, to dive into the code about where that happens.
Yeah, absolutely. So, um, here's what we're going to be looking at here. A lot of it's going to be happening in the backend directory. So this is a fast API in Python. It has a couple different endpoints to it. It has an endpoint that will allow you to upload your own documents, an endpoint that implements a vector search, and an endpoint that has an event handler for what happens when a new message event occurs. Specifically, the one that might be kind of most interesting to look at, there's some of the code in the search that is interesting. So what this will do, this one's pretty simple. This is just the search portion, and it will essentially, it uses Quadrant. So Quadrant is a vector database. We actually have it running inside of our Docker container here. So if you look, you should have something with port 6333. So if you click that and you actually go there and then take that, so localhost 6333, then go to /dashboard, you'll actually have the Quadrant vector database running locally. And you can see here's all of the documentation. It's actually just scraped documentation from our docs, or the company I work for, Asura. And it has all of the different pieces of documentation in it as points in the vector database. So then what this is doing in the code is it's going to go ahead and it's going to take whatever your input is for the text that you input. It's going to create an embedding using OpenAI's embeddings endpoint. And then it's going to search the vector database for semantically relevant points. And so what I mean by that is it uses something called word to vec under the hood. And what that basically does is it takes a sequence of words or a sentence, and it casts it into a vector representation. It's actually really cool the way that it works because it lets us do math on semantic meaning. So it lets us say things like, if I like, the common example they use is like king minus man plus woman equals queen, right? Like you can kind of do math with words, and these vectors are these numerical representations of the sentence that we speak or the context that we provide it, that you can then search, almost like Google search in a sense, where it's like a free, powerful version, not free, but like you use the embeddings to get this really powerful version of search, where you can say, give me the most relevant documents just based on like what the words are, right? Not based on like, oh, I'm looking for like matching keywords, or like normally like we would do like a regular expression search or something, or we might say like, give me something where like it has at least these 5 words in it, and that's how I'm gonna measure how good my results are. Whereas with this, we're measuring it based on what's the closest semantic meaning to the input that I provide, and then we can get those and we can get the results. So if you look at the Discord bot, the way that that's actually working, you have another endpoint called search. You can do /search, and then you can actually fill out a query. I could say, tell me about, I don't know, the CLI again. We'll do that. And then I could pass it a collection. In this case, the only collection currently available is V3. But if I do this, it will go ahead and, oh, let me see the collections I have. Oh, I sent it to the wrong one. I have multiple. If you look, I have demo and I have like practice. I have like 5 of the exact same bot. I sent it to one that wasn't online. So I can say to search for this collection, for example, and you can see it will now give me back the most relevant document links for that, using that semantic search. And that's just directly using that endpoint actually under the hood. So, and then with the OpenAI integration, it piggybacks on top of that. So if you go from the search endpoint to the new message event endpoint, it kind of piggybacks on that. It does a lot of the same stuff to do the search, but then it also will take that information and construct an array of messages with the system prompt and all of the messages from Discord, which we are storing in a Postgres database. So it'll load those back in and say, like, here's all of the messages in the conversation so far. And then it'll ask ChatGPT. It'll perform a call to the chat completions endpoint to ask ChatGPT to generate the response, which then will get sent. In this case, it actually gets posted into the database, and then an event picks it up, and the Discord bot will then send it. But it is pretty neat, and you can definitely take this and poke at it and kind of make it your own a little bit. I would say the place to start would probably be in the constants.py file, and that is where you would want to go and just kind of start messing with different things. The constants has all of the underlying inputs, including the system prompt. So for example, this is our system prompt. It's the one that our company uses to actually serve in our Discord server, which I can send and link to that for anyone who would be interested in joining. This bot is actually running. It answers about 25 questions a week in our Discord server. It's been running for probably about, what, 2 or 3 weeks now in production. So, running pretty much as it is. So, yeah, that's a lot of what we've kind of worked through today.
I have a question.
Yeah, what's up?
Is it now, are you training it as you go to on your
So the plan is to train it in the future. So at
okay.
first, the goal is right to get people to start sending these messages. What's really cool about this, and what I like, and I'll share my screen and talk a little bit about the company I work for, which is Hasura. So I'm powering a lot of this under the hood with Hasura. What Hasura lets you do is it gives you an instant API on top of your existing data. So what that looks like is I laid out these different database tables, and I could go ahead if I wanted to. I could create a new table, just call it table, let's say, and maybe it has an ID, which we'll say is an auto incrementing ID. We'll say it has created at, it has updated at, and maybe it has, I don't know, a field called data, and that's, let's say, text, right? It'll allow us to go ahead and create these tables, and then we will automatically and instantly have a GraphQL API on top of these. And this is what I ended up using to build this under the hood. So I could go ahead and say we wanted to insert some data into that new table we just made. And I could say insert table, and I can just go over here, fill out this nice little thing. Hello world, right? All of those will just be automatically taken care of for me. And we'll say hello, I'll just insert a couple here, hello world 2 and 3. And then we have the ability to instantly query our data. And I can now go ahead and get a instant API on top of that data. And what's neat about this is it actually works with joins as well. So if I were to query, let's say our actual implementation or our bot that we're using, let's say that I wanted to see each message thread. So I can get the thread with the author ID, the number of votes. There's a good bit that actually is going into the under the hood. And then I could get the messages, right? So when you look at that help message that I'd sent, right, you can actually see this was that help thread that I created, right? The first one, and says it's message by message, each message in the context, right? So it's neat because it gives you an instant way to consume these APIs, and then you can even turn these into subscriptions, which is really nice. So I could turn this into like a live query where now it's just running. And if that data is to update in the background, this will automatically just go ahead and send that over a WebSocket to me with the latest updates. So pretty cool tool that I had used to throw this whole thing together. I just made use of all these auto-generated subscriptions, queries, mutations. I don't think I used subscriptions, but I did use a good bit of the mutation in the query. And if you look in the code, actually, you can see that a lot of the queries are just hard coded in my constants. These are the queries that I ended up using, right? So like thread by PK, right, or insert message one, the different GraphQL queries that it uses to run this under the hood. So it's pretty neat. It also has an event built in. So what's actually happening under the hood, if you look, it's actually pulling this backend API from the environment variables, and it's a database trigger. So when a message is inserted into the database, it will actually call the API on the back end, and it will forward that context. And what that would look like actually, something like this, where it plugs into the underlying change data capture, and it would say, oh, there was an insert. This was the old was nothing, right? This is the new entry. And so then you can listen to that and get really nice event-driven systems that are pretty durable. What's nice about this is that if something goes down, right? So, let's say that the back end or one of the portions of this goes down, when it comes back up, assuming that it didn't miss the messages, like, so for example, if the bot goes down, right? When it comes back up, any messages that were being processed or hadn't finished being processed or unprocessed will get picked up and then reprocessed. So like the other day, there was a bug that I hadn't caught yet that I since patched, and it caused my thing to crash. There was like a problem with how I was handling inputs, and it was funny because then I was like, oh man, I'm gonna have to go and like respond to this person, but I turned the bot back on and fixed it, and then as soon as it came back up, all of the messages that had happened since, it just responded to them, because it will, depending on which part of it breaks, it is event driven, so it is kind of you have a separation of concerns, um, so pretty neat. But any other questions or anything anyone's curious about?
Yeah, that's interesting. The GraphQL is like an API. It's not like a messaging service, like a public How are you
Yeah,
doing that?
absolutely. So GraphQL, if you're not familiar with GraphQL, it's kind of a paradigm that's similar to REST. It kind of serves in some ways as a replacement for REST. So right,
Okay.
with REST, you have your get put post delete.
Uh-huh.
Here, let me go ahead and go back to here. With REST, you have get put post delete. And so the idea is, let's say that I had a REST endpoint here that was, I don't know, we'll use this message table, right? So like, see all of these different pieces of, or these fields or pieces of data, right?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, what happened here? Oh, unexpected variables, my bad. Hmm. So I've got all of these different messages, right?
Mm-hmm.
And normally for a REST API, right? If I had a get endpoint, it will be get slash what is this messages, right? So get slash messages, right? You also would have like a post slash message, and
Mm-hmm.
it might be like post slash message slash like ID, but you would like pass the ID as a URL parameter, like right? There's all these different semantic rules that you would have when you use REST, right? Um, and so with this, the problem is if you had this get endpoint, right, it would return all of these responses. So with GraphQL, you don't have to worry about overfetching or underfetching of data. And so, for example, not only does it give me back exactly what I asked for, right? If you look, this is like the GraphQL language. It was spun out of Facebook in 2015,
Mm-hmm.
and then open sourced, and it became part of the Linux Foundation. Actually, there's a GraphQL Foundation attached to the Linux Foundation. Um, and so, if you say only wanted one of these fields, it will only give you back what you ask for, and it will also give them to you in the order that you ask for. I mean, there's a lot of really nice properties
Yeah,
about
this is
this,
cool.
right? Where the JSON that it gives you back looks exactly like the JSON that you ask for. And normally GraphQL is kind of a pain to work with because you have to write really complex, it's called resolvers, right? So think about writing the backend. A lot of the times you would think of GraphQL as pushing the complexity to the backend, right?
Okay.
Because like if I wanted to make this, someone has to write the code to handle all of these different variants or options, right? So like it becomes a little bit more of a lift. But with something like Hasura, so we introspect your underlying database and then automatically generate these APIs for you.
Mm.
Um, where we give you the ability to, do all of this. And you get cool things like complex predicate filtering. So I could be like message where, I don't know, maybe what's one of the fields here? Let's see. What do we got? Content. So message where content is, and I could do equal, like I get a whole bunch of predicate filters from regular expressions to like null checks to like a like. So I could do like where it's like, and I could do like a match, a full text match search here. Where I could be like, hey, where it's like that, and it's like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
well, this one, that's a match there, right? Um, and so it's got a lot of really kind of powerful things that it's capable of doing. It gives you aggregates, the ability to do order by, pagination, right? Limit with your offset. Um, and all of that is kind of just for free. It's weird because like a lot of people see this, they're like, "Whoa, what is that? That's fancy." I work here, so I'm like, "Oh, this is just what do you mean? This is just how you build things, right?"
That's cool. You said it's free? What are they like in a
So
Docker
we have
container?
yeah, we have an open source version. Everything it's funny right now I'm running, I think the one that I've got set up is running like an enterprise trial or something, but everything
Mm-hmm.
that I've shown is completely free. So you
Okay.
can, the container that you're running is the open source version, the one that you've got, spun up.
Mm-hmm.
So, like that everything that's in there, you can just use it. Um, if you've got GraphQL you're using existing, you can bring in a remote schema and plug it in. um and this has got, it's a pretty good example because it shows how the events work. Like it's got the back end to it too, and that was something that I really wanted to include as an example for people of like, hey, if you were wanting to mess with this, it's got, some back end stuff included with like these events, um as well as the underlying database, right? And it even makes use of some fancy things like these enumerations, which is nice because like when you search for things by like enum, you get special filtering. I don't think this will actually have a good example of it now that I went to show it, but Yeah, it's got all of these. Oh, and aggregates. That's another really fun thing that you get for free. So you get the ability to do things like, count, max, min, and then there's a lot of other ones. I can count the number of distinct columns or the number of I can there's an if I had more numbers in here, which I don't have, I think a lot of like floats in here to use as a demo, but you're able to do things like standard deviation or all different kinds of statistics things or aggregations for free as well. But it's pretty neat, especially I would say the predicates. So if you are interested in Asura, definitely give it a look. It's a great way to automate the CRUD side of a lot of your backend work. We like to say that it will automate about 80% of the plumbing of your application, right? Those create, read, update, delete, and it lets you focus on just the business logic side of things. Um, but I won't drone on and on because
No,
I
it's very cool.
appreciate you guys
Yeah.
letting me come and share my stuff. So, don't want to sit here and be like, ooh, and just talk about that the whole time. But
I mean, to tie this back into some of the more to the GPT side of things, uh, it's interesting having this being built on a GraphQL engine, considering that for something like OpenAI's GPT plugin system, they're expecting something like an open API spec, which is REST API spec. And I see that there are requests in for things like plugins to eventually support a GraphQL, but I do wonder because the Discord bot, when it gets a request in from the prompt, it's sending its request over to the fast API layer, which is a REST server, and then you're translating it into the GraphQL to call a database, right?
kind of. So what I'm actually doing, so whenever we get a message, what we're doing under the hood is actually when the bot gets a message, all it's doing is writing it to the database. So the Discord bot, if you look, it's got an event on message. So right, we're gonna say, oh, if it's the right kind of channel, right? If it meets all of the conditions, then we're going to basically execute a GraphQL query to insert a new message, right? Or we're going to insert a new thread, and then we're going to insert a new message. And then what's actually happening under the hood is there's an event inside of this GraphQL engine that is calling that backend API, right? So that's that kind of separation of concerns that I was talking about, right? Where it's like, oh, the only job of the bot is just like, hey, forward this message and then stop thinking about it, right? And a big part of that is because Discord actually limits the amount of time you have to respond, right? So you don't want to just be sitting there and like try waiting and doing a bunch of work and like, oh, hold on, I'll get it back to you, right? Because Discord will time out and it'll be like, no, you didn't respond fast enough, right? So we actually decoupled it, and so then the Discord bot will write the message to this. Hasura will then use its underlying change data capture of listening to these events, which is great because it gives us kind of that almost guaranteed once delivery, right? Like I say guaranteed once because it's impossible to actually have, perfect guaranteed once, but it's the closest thing you're going to get to it, right? Where we get this ability to then make sure that this will only happen once because it plugs into these underlying events, right? So like there's actually events being tracked by our Hasura engine, and it will track, it's got like default for retries and it's very durable, right? And so then that will call that underlying backend via this event, which right here, this little backend URL, that's actually the environment variable, and it's pulling it in and then using the route from the API that I'm passing it.
Is this the task loop that's calling that event?
Which
I
one?
remember there was a task loop
Yeah, the task loop
script. Yeah.
yeah, so the task loop is running every 1 second, and its
Okay.
job is basically to run. Um it's basically it's similar to what you would have with like a inventory system or something where you need a transactionality, right? Where
Hmm.
if we look at, oh, hold on, let me
So you
if we
kind of
look at
built your
the
own message broker, basically.
kind of, yeah.
Okay.
If you look at the GraphQL that's running, it's actually running a mutation where if you look at the filtering, this is what I really like about like the power of Sura. I'm saying update the message. I want you to update all the message where the from bot is currently equal to true and process is equal to false. Set process equal to true. That's an atomic operation. So I can guarantee it's only going to happen once. And then give me all the messages you did that for. Right. So I'm basically saying, okay, give me all of those messages, but set that to true. So this won't happen, in the next second. And then I can go and take all of these messages every 1 second, collect them, and then send them back out through the Discord bot, right? So it's kind of this disconnected thing where it fires the message and then that's all it does, right? And then the GraphQL engine picks it up and hits it to the back end, and then the back end processes it, does the AI stuff, and then sends a response into the database. And then again, it picks that up and it says, oh, okay, well, that's undelivered now. So the bot then picks it back up and sends it, right? So it kind of decouples it, and it becomes an event-driven system that would be highly scalable as well.
Yeah, the event-driven aspect of that's exactly what you said before, where like Discord, but even just beyond Discord, humans have an expectation of, if I don't hear something back, then something is not working. And either having something be event-driven, like this is, or what we see with something like the ChatGPT demos, they're streaming the results, and that's just showing you how slow these LLMs still are, because they're it's so intensive to try to generate this content. And what we saw earlier when you were asking, hey, how do I get started with the CLI, is that I'm going to be I'm going to go answer that from you. So that was the event-driven part, where it's ingested a task. We needed to come back and give an immediate response to say, hey, I'm going to be right back. I'm generating this answer. Meanwhile, on the back end, the LLM is processing all of these out at just a couple of words at a time. And then once the whole thing was created, to give the entire generated result back. It's
Yeah,
fascinating.
exactly. And what's cool about it too, so like Discord, for example, doesn't actually have the ability to do streaming. So like some of the people that I work with were like, "Well, why doesn't it stream it?" And I'm like, "Well, I thought about it, and the only way that you could feasibly do it would be to just constantly edit the message, but you get rate limited, right? So it was like, so if you had built your own front end, which you totally could, right? You could build your own, like, I don't know, spin up something and like use HTML, heck, use like, I don't know, Flask, or use Ginger templating, right? Whatever you would want to do, you could spin up your own little front end, and you could, if you wanted to, actually stream the response from ChatGPT. But in this case, since it wouldn't make a difference for the user experience, since Discord can only handle, it as one message, we figured we'll just wait, right? Um, but but yeah,
I
Along,
got,
sorry.
oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Go ahead. Sorry.
Okay. I do have one more for you, and this may not come down to the Discord and GPT handling here. It comes down to the prompt, but I'd be curious if we could go back to Discord and ask your documentation bot something that is very clearly not in the documentation.
yeah, sure. And a lot of that will again come to the prompt, like you said. But let's go ahead and so I don't know. Let's ask it about. Tell me about the foo bar, because I don't think we have that. I would like to know how to use the well-documented foo bar. See what it does.
If it comes back with something, then we'll know that foobar is in there.
Well, and it is interesting because it is still plugging into ChatGPT, right? So like it still has latent information that it knows, right?
Mhm.
Um, it seems there was a bit of confusion in your query. You mentioned wanting to know how to use the well-documented foobar in the context of Hasura, but I couldn't find any specific references to a feature or component named foobar within the Hasura GraphQL API documentation or in the search results provided. And then it's going to tell us a little bit about Hasura. Hasura is a powerful platform that provides instant real-time GraphQL APIs over new or existing Postgres databases. allows for a wide range of operations, you know, blah, blah, blah. If foobar was a placeholder, a specific term you're using for a concept or feature within Hasura or that you're more interested in, please provide more details or clarify. And what's cool is you could actually, you know, respond to it. So like you can actually continue with this, which is kind of neat, where I could say, you know, tell me more or whatever, and it will continue to converse with you each time that you ping it actually. Um, so it is like a continual, and the way we use it in our forum is actually multiple people. So like normally the forum before we had implemented this, it was just people that would answer, right? Like I am in charge of our Discord server and our forum, so like I'm normally the one that's like, okay, let me go search our docs, try to find an answer. Whereas what's nice with this is like it provides that first pass, and a lot of times people will be like, ah, it's not quite what I wanted actually, but it's great because it also will give you the ability to find gaps in your docs, right? So like it's very clear that if this was a feature that was supposed to be, you know, documented, well, we know that it's not, right? So it kind of does both. And a lot of that will be again the prompt, which the prompt is, let me see where that is. It's in the constants file again. So you can change all of this yourself, which is fun, I think. So definitely, you know, if you've got some time or you want to play with it, feel free. You know, I think this is the prompt we use. You're a helpful search and support engineer GPT who handles a query. I put this little like formatting thing to try and, because then when I wrap the questions, I wrap them inside of like little pseudo HTML things, just anything you can do to kind of try and like fine tune this thing and make it better understand, right? And it talks about, you know, you answer a query about the Hasura GraphQL API software platform. You operate in the help forum for the Hasura Discord channel. You're capable of surfacing search results, right? So you just kind of provide it some of the context, and it is pretty detailed. We try and do some guidance here in system prompt, but really, I mean, that's all it is. It's just a pretty transparent wrapper around ChatGPT.
So, and my question kind of goes along with that. How is the RAG part working with? Are you injecting your
Yeah, so if
in
you
every prompt or
yes, exactly. So what we
okay?
basically do, so if you look, so what we're basically doing is we're sending it a couple things. So we'll send it the system prompt, and
Uh-huh.
that's like this big long like thing that's always the same, and that's the very first thing that tells it like what it is or what it believes it is. Then we will send it the query, which will look something like this, where we'll format it with like the title of the query and then the question itself, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then we will basically we'll treat it as if the assistant said itself. So like if you look, it says, I've gathered some search results that are likely to be helpful in assisting the user. Here are the search results, right? And then we'll format that. We'll dump all of the search results there, and then we'll ask it to generate another response. So the way that I've found that it works well is to have it treat it as if it came up with the search results itself, right? Like make it so that it looks like the bot spit those out and said that, and then ask it to generate another message, and then it will take that and it takes all of the message context, right? So as the conversation continues, right, if someone else like interjects and a different person says like, oh, well, did you think about this or whatever, and then someone asks the bot again, it will take into context like all of the
The
different
previous,
messages.
yeah. Now,
It doesn't, yeah, what's up?
no, I was thinking that's probably expensive token wise using the API.
It's
If you
not
have to inject that every time, or
it can be, so it depends. So like the GPT-4 Turbo isn't too bad for the pricing. Although the cool thing about something like this is that you could also pretty easily plug in like Hugging Face models, like fully
mm,
open source models. We just chose to use GPT because it's one of the best quality right
it
now.
is, yeah.
And so you know we really wanted to try and provide our users with best quality, but like for a run your own type thing, you know, like you could totally plug in like Hugging Face or your own models, right? Um and we definitely do, you know, end up paying uh a decent amount for it, but I think the usage is like for us maybe like between like $1 to $5 a day. It will depend on how many
Oh,
questions
okay.
we get, but in the context of like comparatively it does the amount of work of probably at least an entire like support engineer, right?
Mhm.
Just to be able to like give a quick first pass, like, well, here's the docs I found for that, and like here's the answer I can come up with based on what you have in your docs, right? Because like
Right.
if the answer is not there, then it almost tells you you might need better docs, right? Like it tells you, hey, this is the best that the user could have come up with if they were a quote unquote perfect user, right? That did all the Googling and read all the docs and did all that, which most people aren't. They just throw a question and how do I do this? And so for a lot of those, we'll get people that will insta solves is what I call them. And it makes me happy when it get like I'll see it and it'll just be like it'll ask a question and then someone will do the little check mark. Bot got it. It's like awesome. That saves me time, saves everybody time.
That's cool. It sounds like a good resume bulletin point. Save the company X amount.
answered all the questions.
Mhm.
So yeah. Any other questions, guys, or does anyone else have any curiosities? Feel free to mess with it. There is the accompanying blog post. Would love to see if anyone like hacked on their own stuff or added something on to it, or even just something small. If you're not super you know advanced with the Python stuff, just add it, see if you can add a command, right? Like see if you can add a simple command to do something pretty simple. But it's cool because it does take away some of that UI aspect and lets you mostly just write Python. That's why I kind of like building bots like this, right? I don't have to sit there and write all the HTML, like set up all the front end stuff. I can mostly just write Python code and, use this SDK that has the front end kind of handled for you.